first game back after so long. It was just frustrating. Just coming back from a knee to break your foot, very, very demoralizing. You can't help the boys, you can't add to the team in the way you normally do on the field. So, what value can I bring? Where can you help the team? It's a very different thing when you experience it for yourself, and the darkness and the loneliness of it. The quicker you realize that your ego is gonna hold you back and you need to just push it to the side and get on with the work, the easier it'll be to improve. There's a clear way that you need to go if you want to be in the building long term.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Coach G Show. Today we have an interesting guest. Today we're going to talk about what does it really take to become an elite level prop. Not the highlight reel version, not the overnight success story, but the real journey, the setbacks, the position changes, the injuries, and the years of grafting before anyone notices you. Today's guest is someone who understands that better than most. Simon Kerrod is part of the Premiership. Simon Kerrod is a Premiership-winning prop with Harlequins, someone who can play both loose head and tight head at the highest level, and someone whose career didn't follow the traditional pathway. It took Simon years to break through, took resilience, patience, and willingness to learn, including working under Adam Jones and playing alongside guys like Joe Marler. In the episode, we go deep into what it really takes to play in the front row today, the technical demands of being an elite level prop, the differences between the English and the French packs, how to bounce back from a poor scrum performance, and how to survive in a position where pressure never disappears. We also talk about vision regrets and also being part of an unbelievable Harlequins squad, balancing life as an elite athlete, and how Simon is preparing for life after rugby. In this honest conversation about earning your place, staying there, and knowing who you are beyond the jersey, this is Simon. Simon, brother, how's it going? You good?
Yeah, man, good. Thanks to you. Good to be here.
All right. That was a bit of a lengthy intro. Almost botched it up there a little bit. But anyway, listen here. Great to chat to you with you, my man. How's things your side? Nice and sunny there in the UK?
Yeah, UK always known for its good sunny weather all the time. Yeah, it's been raining and icy and very, like the other day, I think what said, feels like -9. So that was pleasant to wake up to. No sun, basically dark from 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the morning. So no, all good, yeah.
Well, that's intense. So, I hate it when it gets dark so late. It kind of throws me off. And especially in the morning, when the sun only rises up so late, I like to go for walks in the morning when the sun's not out. It kind of throws me off. But yeah, -9, I can relate. Recently, we had -80 in Toulouse. It wasn't that great. It was nice and freezing, but luckily we got heating. But unfortunately, this is the thing of heating. It's expensive, so it pushes up your gas bill a bit.
Yeah.
But Simon, how's things going? Recently coming back from injury, involved in the Champions Cup. How's things going your side?
Yeah, it was a bit of a frustrating, period of time for me. I got injured. I hurt my knee, and then as I was coming back from that, I broke my foot against Northampton in a Prem Cup game, and I was just like, what the hell, man? I just come back from this long. It wasn't like a bad injury per se. There wasn't any surgery or anything, but it was just like a bit of a setback, and I just had to look after it. And then as soon as I got back to break my foot, first game back after so long, it was just frustrating. But no, now I'm back playing again, so very grateful for that. And yeah, but how injuries are. You just got to focus on getting out of them rather than get too down about being injured.
So tell me, how long were you out before you re-injured yourself again when you broke your foot?
So basically, I just had a bit of about 5 months, just out not playing, just kind of stay off the leg a bit, and then the return to play with all of the fun watt bikes and echo bikes and up downs and all of that fun stuff. And then back playing, and then it was just a freakish, just on a carry. I just was doing pick and goes, and I just felt it go in my foot. And at first I thought like, nah, it's okay, just run it off, but it wouldn't go away. it was about 13 or so minutes in, and the physio came on, and I remember looking at the clock like 26 minutes, and they're like, yeah, 5 minutes till half time. And I was like, really? It says 26 minutes. But no, yeah, it was just frustrating because, just coming back from a knee to breaking foot, very, very demoralizing.
And how long were you out with your foot afterwards again?
For 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Yeah.
So look, I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, that for us as rugby players, when we get injured, it like our whole world comes caving down. And for them, they just see another player taking our place. As long as their team is winning and performing, they are happening. But maybe take us a bit behind the scenes, especially with that 4 to 5 month stint where you were injured. What goes through a rugby player's mind at that stage? How did you experience that period?
Yeah, I think all of us are very similar as rugby players. You get some bad news and you think the worst. And then once people tell you like, okay, you're going to have a bit of time off, you're going to have to get yourself right, you just start spiraling and thinking about like, why is this happening to me? Could I have done anything different? What does this look like for the next couple of months? And then after that, the frustration comes when you start going into the team environment and you can't help the boys. You can't add to the team in the way you normally do on the field. So you have to find other ways of, bringing the energy and, look at a bit of analysis. But a lot of the time it's hard, you want to be part of the team, but you just kind of doing your rehab and getting, in and out of the building and trying to get better as quick as you can. But it can be very frustrating.
But what, and I totally agree. We've all been there. There was a stint I was injured for 2 years, and unfortunately, it's part of the game, being injured, and it can get frustrating at times. Some handle it better than others. Some end up binge eating or binge drinking, picking up weight. But I think if you're today a real professional, that's not so much of an issue these days. But the frustrations can get the better of us, and obviously, sometimes we want to go way fast, and always tell players you got to like respect all the steps, go step by step. Don't try and accelerate. And you also got to understand that setbacks is also part of the process. It's just new information that your body's giving you and saying, listen, take it easy, take it easy. But what I would like to ask you is that what kept you sane during that time? Sometimes you can get frustrated because, let's be honest, you might be a warrior, but then at some stage, you feel like, listen, you're no longer one of the boys because you're not in the graft or in the grind the whole time. You're not on the field. It's like almost you lose a bit of credibility. One, is that the case? And two, what did you do to just keep yourself sane and just get through that period?
Yeah, I always think like, when you're playing and you're contributing on the field, you can, move the team forward and give your input. But then when you're injured, you almost feel like, well, what's I don't really have a leg to stand on. I haven't played. I haven't been in the game. Contributing to the team. So what value can I bring? So you're kind of trying to find especially if it's like a 4 or 5 month time when you're out for so long, you're trying to find where can you help the team. And I think what kept me sane and what always keeps me sane is because I like gymming quite a bit. So as soon as like a setback comes, I just say, okay, well, I'm going to really focus on getting my fitness back, because last time when I came, like if there was another time when I was injured or an off season where I didn't put as much work into conditioning, I say, well, I don't want to suffer, I don't want to battle to run again. So I'm going to work on that quite a lot. And then like now with this period, I just focused on, okay, I need to finish my PT degree. I have time now, do that. And just try and stay busy, like the coaching with the Scrum coaching, I was like, well, let me try see, because that will help me in my game. If I can look at where people struggle, I can also apply that to my game and then, learn that way instead of, because normally how you learn is you're training in the week, you're playing on the weekend, you're getting feedback all the time. When you're injured, to find a way to get that feedback, I just thought, let me look at scrums and help people. And then if I see that in myself, I can also like self-coach almost.
It's brilliant because I think, a lot of youngsters when they get injured, they get quite down on themselves and they feel like, it's the toughest period they will face. And what advice would you give to young players, getting their first big injury? Because sometimes when players get that big injury for the first time, it really feels like the worst thing that's ever happened to them. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, it's horrible when you get a big injury. I remember when I just joined Worcester, first preseason game. So I just come from Jersey, very excited about playing the Premiership. The prospect of that. Had always dreamed of it. It was like something I wanted to do as soon as I came over to the UK. And the first preseason game, I tore my adductor off the bone. So I pulled a bit of my hip off the bone on my adductor. So I had to have surgery. And you just, it's very, one thing when people say to you, just stay positive and all that, but it's a very different thing when you experience it for yourself. And the darkness and the loneliness of it. But you just have to focus on, listen, you're young, you got time, and you're injured now for this period of time. So whether you make the best of it or you waste it, that time is going to pass either way. So I think the most important thing is trying to focus on like, okay, what 1%ers or 2%ers can I do now while I'm injured that are going to add to my game when I come back. So for me, that's always been something to like focus on.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think what you just mentioned earlier in your recent injury, use that time to get your PT certification. So congratulations on that. That's awesome. That's brilliant. And you spoke about doing analysis and coaching, and that's important that players need to understand. If you're injured, I always tell players that this is an opportunity to level up, to upskill yourself. Maybe not just in rugby, but in other areas of life. There might be someone in the club or the sponsors that's involved. There might be a skill that you might be interested in or they do, whether it's carpentry or whether it's marketing, digital marketing, or something in the creative space. You can go spend time. You can use that time constructively, or use that time to read a book, or follow something on YouTube, for example, which intrigues you. You're not a great handyman or handy person around the house. Use that time to try and fix things or something.
Yeah.
But it's important to have that so-called positive distraction. It doesn't always has to be in the rugby world. I will. Obviously, we've known each other now for quite a bit of years, and I've always followed your career as well, and you always impressed me with your perseverance and your work ethic. It's always been impressive. But when I did my due diligence for this pod as well, I realized that you didn't really have a typical pathway. Everybody sees you now at Harlequins, and I noticed that it took you quite a bit before you got that big break. We see so many young players today that they in the academy and they just want to go pro. At the age of 21, they get frustrated. They're 20 years old, 21 years old. They're training with the pro team, but they're not getting opportunity and they get irritated. Take us through your journey, because you started out at the Kings. Then you came over to the UK to play for Jersey, if I'm not mistaken, and you will tell me in which championship, but it's not a well-known, like, for example, a top team, but it's well-known in the UK. And then only later you signed at the Worcester Warriors eventually, and then that led to your opportunity at Harlequins. Take us through that journey, because 4 years, you made your big break. You just mentioned before the spot, the age of, I think, 24, 25, you got your first big break. Take us through that journey on how you eventually ended up at the Harlequins.
Yeah, it was when, so I went to Pretoria Boys High, and, everyone always obsesses, like, when you get, and I was a boarder as well, so I was obsessed with like playing for the Candies. That's the first team. Like I was just like, everyone, you just want to play first team rugby. You know how it is at school. You just like first team. And when that happened, then I thought like, okay, I can, I love rugby. I want to give it a go. So I end up going to the Sharks Academy, and like you say, like there's superstars around you. So when you're young and you're in an academy setup, like you got guys like there's Peter Steff and those kind of guys, and they're just flying to the top. And it's very easy to get to that stage of like, oh, like, why can't that happen to me? Like, I should be, you compare yourself to your peers, and some guys are just flying through at like 21, 22, making the big breaks. But for me, I was just focused on, one thing at a time, just take it as a kind of mentality. Was like, something will happen. I always believed that, I will make it. I think maybe it was just probably stubborn as well as perseverance. Like, you have to be a little bit stubborn. You have to really believe that what you're doing is going to work. And I think for me, I just never doubted that I was going to get there. So then I went to the Kings, like you said. And then I got an opportunity to go to Jersey. And when I was in Jersey, it's a Channel Island. So it's a little island off of the coast of England. And they play in the championship. They were in the championship. I think they are now a couple of leagues down. But then from there, I went to Worcester. And I was 24, 25 when I signed with Worcester Warriors. And from there, it's gone really, really well. I've been lucky enough to be signed, picked up by Harlequins at that stage in 2019. I signed at Quins. And I think for me, it was just learning as much as I could off of all of the people going through those systems and just never losing belief. I just knew that if I put the work in, the results will come. It might not necessarily be like an immediate thing, but over time, the results will come.
So what initially was the dream or the vision for you, when you were that young player at the Kings? What were you working towards?
Well, I was lucky enough. My dad was born in England, so I grew up with a British passport. So I always knew that coming over to England was a possibility, and playing in England. And I always used to watch when I was still in school, like 2008, 2009. I always used to watch all the Premiership rugby, and at that stage, guys, when I was younger, like Alassana Tuilangi, the Tuilangi brothers were just wreaking havoc. Brian Mujati was at Saints destroying scrums. So like, and the crowds, the crowds always were like packed into stadiums and just like making so much noise. So, and I always just like had this image of coming over and playing in the UK. I don't know what it was, really, really weird, but kind of think the 2007 World Cup as well. I was 15 years old, and I remember the Puma adverts that were in SA Rugby magazine of like the guys running it. And I think one of them was Chapal and one of them was Alassana Tuilangi. And I was just like, man, I don't know what it is, but I just want to go far in rugby. And then obviously we won the World Cup, and it was just, that was it. I think from that moment onwards, it was just like, nah, that's it, man. I'm doing rugby. But yeah, it was pretty cool, because I remember that was a big turning point in my focus on, this game means a lot more to me than I thought it did.
All right. So, when you were the Kings, you made that big call to come over to the UK. And when you came over to Jersey. So obviously that was a massive call from your side. What was the reason that you wanted to go over to Jersey? Did you know that this could potentially open the door into a Premiership team? Weren't things going well in South Africa? Did you feel you were stuck? What was the main reason why you decided to go over to the UK at that stage? I know you said you've always been attracted to the Premiership, but making that choice.
Yeah. It was a big choice. And the Kings at that stage had actually gone under. So we were like, I kind of had to look around, what options that I have. And my agent said to me, look, there's, you've got a British passport, you've played some Currie Cup, you've got experience. So, you're not going to get a Premiership deal right now, because it was, I think, mid-season in December at that point. So they were still, here they're playing mid-season in December, and in South Africa, we were in pre-season because it ran differently. So I was like, I actually just got to take a chance and come over, because I just believed that if I get an opportunity to impress in the champ, I will get signed by a Premiership side. So at that point, it was kind of like, either I'm going to come over here and play, or I'm going to wait around in South Africa till maybe someone picks me up.
Yeah, that's a big call, eh? And that also means you had a lot of belief to make that decision to come over, and I think that's a great lesson for our younger players, because often players, they just targeting the big teams, whether it's top 14, whether it's Premiership or whether it's URC teams. And sometimes I always tell the younger players, they feel it's the step down. When we get here in France, we obviously got the Pro D2, we got the National, we got National 2. And I often tell the academy, just go play National, even though it's like 2 levels below top 14. Get game time. The quality players that are in that championship, you'll gain experience, you'll get reps. That is so important. And sometimes I do feel players' egos get the better, because they tend to compare themselves to them friends, their teammates. While my team, you just mentioned back in the day, you were guys like Steph Dutoy, and they were just accelerating. And you got to understand that everybody's running their own race, and you just got to stick to your guns. And I want to commend you on that, because that was unbelievable. Then eventually getting that opportunity to go to Worcester Warriors. You were there, I think, for 2 years, and then you've now played over 100 games, I believe, for Quins.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there any memories that stand out, being a South African boy, as we would say in the UK, any memories that stand out while you've been at Quins? You're still at Quins. Anything that stands out that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, obviously winning the Premiership in just after COVID, that was amazing. That was pretty crazy, and I think ever since when I did get to Quins, I think it was like my first European Champions Cup game was against Clermont at Clermont in 2019, which was pretty crazy as well. Just the atmosphere was mental. Beating Bordeaux in Bordeaux 2 years ago as well, and making the semi-final to go play against Toulouse in Toulouse. There's so many amazing memories that have come at Quins. It really is. It's been incredible, and like you say, like this came from, I think, taking the risk of playing. I think that thing you said about ego is such a good point, because it's hard. Like, I remember one time I was coming back from an injury at the Kings, and Carlos Spencer said to me, "Listen, if you want to play, you got to go get game time at Border." So I played a couple of games for Border Bulldogs, and I remember thinking like, I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to go, down a level and play, But now, you look at it and you're like, sometimes those games, especially like in the championship, like you said, in the Pro D2, there's guys are big that can scrum, and you're probably going to learn the best lessons you can at that level. That'll put you in good stead for going forward into a professional, bigger club setup. So sometimes I think people need to not let the ego get in the way and go learn, because you're going to learn a lot more than you will just training and doing and like you said, no game time.
I think that's so important. I had to learn that lesson the hard way as well back in my day at the Bulls. When Heineke Meyer, I made my Springbok debut in 2004. And then in 2005, I was playing the Vodacom Cup for the Bulls, which my ego took a massive knock. Being a Springbok playing the Vodacom Cup and not even making the Bulls team. But also, to be fair, I was also coming off an injury. I got injured at the end of that year too, but my ego took a knock. And Heineke Meyer, he said the same thing. Just get game time, get experience. You're not used to our structures yet, and if you play now, you will be exposed. And he also said to me, "You're not ready. You got your first cap, but I'm not sure you deserved it yet." And that was hard to hear, when a coach calls you out like that. And talking about that, is there any coaches during your career that called you on your bullshit and said, "Listen here, this is what you did," that had a massive impact on your career, that allowed you to shift your mindset and, do things way better?
Yeah, I think like Bom's always been pretty honest with me. Since when I got to Quins, it's always been crazy competition. You know what I mean? It's been like when I got here, there was Carl Sinclair and Will Collier, and then we signed Walker Lowe, and so it's always been crazy competition at prop. And then at Lucid, you got like Marler and Santi was here, and all of these international players all the time. And when you scrumming against them week in, week out, and you're not on your game, like there's no room for like being fluffing around. You know what I mean? They just tell you as it is. So Bom's been pretty honest with me when I'm not performing, and he said, look, you need to get back to the level you were at, or you need to work on this. But yeah, it's quite a wake up. I wouldn't say wait, like sometimes it's gonna come, but hearing it is kind of, it's like you're disappointing your dad. It's not something you want to hear. You want to try and be your best all the time, but sometimes you got to have those conversations and say, look, like, where you are, where you need to be, you need to work on it and change it. I think again, there's two choices. The time's going to pass either way. Either you listen and you want to improve and take on board the critique, or you can be like, nah, fuck this. I don't want to listen to this guy, whatever, I can do it. But there's a clear way that you need to go if you want to be in the building long term. And I think the quicker you realize that your ego is going to hold you back and you need to just push it to the side and get on with the work, the easier it'll be to improve.
That's brilliant. I'm assuming when you talk about Bom, that's Adam Jones. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, he was an unbelievable player and lots of respect. And I always used to get frustrated with him, not because of his scrummaging, but because of his hair, because I didn't have hair. So like obviously being all sweaty when I would break up from a scrum, I had hair all over my head, plastered and stuff like that. It was just, it was ridiculous. But yeah, that's important because, sometimes the ego can get the better of us. But tell me, when you get dealt that information, when you call it criticism, I'll call it feedback. When you get that feedback and it's something which you don't like, do you have a specific process which you go through? So like obviously we are proud, especially being props and the scrummages and everything, sometimes, our defensive system comes up and we don't agree. I mean, I was definitely like that back in the day. Was the Bulls. I remember, Barley Swart would come out as a Scrum consultant back then, and I said, no, I don't believe in this bullshit and what he was doing, and like he was genuinely trying to help me, but also at stages my ego got the better of me. Only later I was a bit more open. But how do you process that information when you hear something which you don't like, but you do know that the person delivering it is actually doing it with good intention?
Yeah, I think earlier on when you're younger and you're trying to make your mark and, you're coming through, you can see it as a bit of a personal, like, attack on yourself. Like, I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not meant for this level and stuff like that. And it feels very personal. But, as you go on and the harder you are on yourself and the more you look at your game with seeing where you can improve, that if you have a bad scrum, you've had a bad scrum. There's and then hearing that feedback, it's how do you go forward from there? You know what I mean? It's but I think maturing in that process, like realizing that they're trying to help you and it's not something that's personal, that's when you get real growth, because then you're looking at like, what can we do to improve? How can we fix it? Not like, oh, this is an attack on me. They were doing this and the ref and whatever. It's more like, how can we do better ourselves and listen to the feedback? As you say, it's not a personal thing whatsoever.
Yeah, I think, if I look back to my career, there were times that when I was at those one-on-ones, and I always remember, I think it was in 2008, it wasn't a one-on-one, it was a one-to-many. I was sitting in the middle of the room and all the Springbok coaches were there, Peter de Villiers, Dick Muir, Gary Gold, and it was very intimidating. And I was told, listen, I need to step it up. And, I walked out there and she was like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? We just won against Dunedin, and that was a very important lesson, because I haven't spoken about this before, because when I got back, I got dropped. I played against Australia that following game. I got dropped afterwards, and that's when Beast came in, Beast, the legend of Springbok rugby, and he was doing really well. He was still a youngster. But, I ask myself now, and it actually came to me early in the week, what if I just listened more? Instead of being so proud and borderline full of myself, because in my mindset back then, Osterrand retired, this is now my time, and it was like a given. And that's the mistake that I made. instead of just listening to the coaches, and also being a coach myself and being in situations we have those meetings with the players, and players' ego would get the better of them. They don't agree. They walk out of the meeting frustrated. But at the end of the day, your job as a coach is to help them, to educate them and get them on the right track. And, I think it's very important, especially for younger players, not just younger players, experienced players. You need to listen. You need to listen to the feedback. And I can give you a lot of examples. You're now 33-year-old, if I'm not mistaken. All right. I was about 35, 36 towards the end of my career, and I always thought I knew better. And, back then, Joe Marler was trying to give me hints. He was trying to kind of like guide me, and I thought everybody was against me. I'm end of my career. We'll all go through that. You're going to face that at some stage. Hopefully not too soon. Hopefully you still got a few more years in you, but
Yeah, exactly.
it's very important to listen. But I want to talk about, the favorite topic, which all props, and no, it's not food. All right, scrummaging. The Scrum has evolved over the years. Sometimes I look back to my days in 2012 when it was crouch, touch, set, boom. You just went in. A lot of things have changed. How do you feel the Scrum has evolved over the years, with certain law changes, the breakfoot that has come in? How did that affect the Scrum for you?
Yeah, I think looking back on it, like you said, like you look at those scrums from, I think, 2011 up until, I think, till even the 2011 World Cup, you look at them, you guys used to just fly in. Like, I think I played under 20, maybe first team college rovers game where we still had those old laws in 2011. And yeah, it was just about basically you hit and you can just, all bets are off. I think with the law changes, it's made it a little bit more, you got to be a bit more technically sharp with angles and timing, and it's a lot more precise. I like the break. I think the breakfoot law is good in a way. I do like it if there's a half breakfoot. I'm not so much a fan of like the full breakfoot all the way up. I like it that some refs let you move, the hookers move it like half a step back, because that allows you momentum. I think it's really hard on the hookers. They must keep their foot up and not take any weight through their neck, but then still somehow drop us across the scrum. Do you know what I mean? And if they're not taking weight through their neck, we taking all the way through our necks as well. So, it's an interesting one. But the evolution of the scrum, I think right now is probably where they must just not tweak any more, laws and stuff. I think people like to play around with the scrums a bit too much, but I do think like it's an amazing part of rugby union. It's one of the, it's a defining characteristic of rugby union. And when there's a big scrum battle, I definitely, and I know a lot of other people do, but I love watching like scrums go at it, man. You know what I mean? Like when there's two big packs and they having a real tussle, or just like one pack is completely dominant. It's pretty amazing to see the raw power,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Coming back to the breakfoot, maybe to explain to our audience, those who are listening and watching, don't know what the breakfoot, like what's the breakfoot? What is it? Not everybody is scrum junkies. So basically the breakfoot is your right foot off your hooker, that the World Rugby introduced to stabilize the scrum. In their mind, they feel that it's stabilizing the scrum. I'm not a big fan of the breakfoot because I feel it has taken away the power on the hit. Obviously in my day, we loved the hit, but they brought it in, and apparently or allegedly, the stats have dropped down. Whether that's true or not, I tend to disagree. There's way more collapse scrums today than I can remember. But yes, they've introduced this is where the hooker has his right foot slightly forward, trying to manage his weight and hold his front row up and trying to reduce the intensity of the engage. Simon, you've been playing professional rugby for a while. In your mind, what does it take for a prop to compete in the modern game? Not just set piece wise, but rugby in general. What are the main requirements to compete at this level?
So first and foremost, your understanding of the game. The game these days is very technical. A lot of systems and a lot of dynamics within the team where you play, where you kick, where you run, all the zones of the field. So it's not good enough to just be like a freakish athlete that can do, amazing things, just with a rugby ball. You need to actually also be smart and be able to learn the systems that you play in. And then on top of that, as a prop, obviously still first and foremost, it's your scrummaging. And then it's your, being able to, your collision. And then after that, it's probably like your X factor, like things that you do that other props can't do. If you're a fetcher, if you are someone that makes line breaks or, throws, if you can throw skip passes, or I don't know, that's something that a prop would have in their super strengths. But it's, first and foremost, it's your scrummaging, and then it's your ability to be effective in collisions.
I always say you got to have a superpower. Obviously, set piece is a priority, but at the end of the day, you need to bring something else. We always say talent brings you in the room, but what are you doing to stay there? You got to constantly develop your work ethic and your skill acquisition, which is very important. But coming back to the scrum, what are the common mistakes you see that young props make?
Trying to do things on their own. I think, when they feel that they're making it through, or they're coming through and they're getting their first big break, and they try and, have a big scrum or try and do something on their own, and it kind of puts everyone else under pressure or out of system, or they try and go, if you're tight head and you're trying to go through the seam, but it's not on, other loose head catches you. Or if you're a loose head and you're trying to go forward, but you end up kicking around, and then your tight head gets drowned from the other loose head, things like that. And then just getting frustrated. I think if they have a bad scrum, it like seeps into the next couple of scrums as well, instead of being able to just say, okay, I had a bad scrum, flush it out. And then continue with, you'll have another scrum and another scrum, opportunities to, continue, go back to zero and have another go. Letting that get to them, I think.
So do you have a process, like if you had a bad scrum in the game, you just mentioned there, just flush it out, that's something a lot of coaches say, just shake it off or just move on. But, how do you do that? What goes through your mind? You just got stuffed up in the scrum, and a few minutes later, there's another one. What goes through your mind? How can you bounce back from that? We have seen it in the past, various times. One team dominates, and then the next one, that same team that dominated gets dominated.
Yeah. I think it's just about, understanding that one scrum is not going to define your game. So I try not to think about it. If I have a bad scrum in a game, I don't think about it too much. I'll say, okay, that was bad. I quickly think, like, what went wrong? Is it something that was I not switched on there? Was I too late or not aggressive? Or, I try to figure it out very quickly. And then the next scrum that comes, I just make sure that doesn't happen again, basically. It's obviously, and then after the game, that review process of going through actually what happened in more detail, you can figure out then how to not let that happen again at all. That's the idea. But during the game, you just want to get to the next scrum and fix what you did wrong in that scrum.
Yeah, it's important. You're talking there about as well, which I call the next job mindset. You got to focus on the next job. But I always tell players, and I mentioned this a lot in my online community on school, Coach G Level Up, and I've had this discussion, and I always tell players, firstly, how can I say, establish, are you capable of analyzing what just happened? If you know what went wrong, why you struggled, what went wrong, then you can actually put a plan into place. You can put a plan into place, and then you can correct it. If you have no clue what happened and where things are wrong, then you just need to you need to put it aside and you say, you know what, I'll deal with that in a post-game analysis. Let's get back in a fight. I think that's very important. Too many youngsters, when they had those poor scrums, they get frustrated, they start to doubt themselves, and we just see they go down this negative spiral. Another question, Ed, we all know how important scrum training is, because that's where sometimes you earn your spot on the team. How do you prepare for those scrum sessions? And what do? you're playing this weekend and you had a really poor scrum session. What goes through your mind?
Yeah, that's sometimes sometimes that can be a good thing if you've had a dodgy scrum session at training, because you go into the game with a bit of fear. So you're just so like amped up for the scrum that you just like you let the adrenaline take over and you actually do better. And the opposite's also true. Like I sometimes get a little bit like I'll be a little bit more worried if it's gone too easy at training. I'll get a little bit like, oof, I don't know if that's such a good thing. I don't want to have flown through people in the week and then go to the game and think, flip, this is a lot harder than at training. So for me, when it's a real battle at training and it's like a stalemate, you're working hard and it's really competitive. Those are the best training sessions for me that I love, when they're really, really competitive. You go into the game feeling prepared. It's worse for me if it's just like you're just going through everyone every scrum session. Then I think like, I don't know if the boys are switched on, because it's also an 8-man thing. So you don't want to think like we just think this is going to happen on the weekend because of what happened in training.
So maybe just to give our audience, a bit of insight in terms of how you prepare for a game as a prop. What is important? Obviously, you got the scrum session. Is there any other work that you're doing outside of that scrum session to get you ready for the game?
Yeah, you look at your opposition. What they do, any like traits of theirs specifically, individually, like how they like to bind. What don't they like? So if people don't like pressure being put on them on the bind, or if they overlean, or if they angle in, how they scrum, knowing all of that, because that helps you box smart on the weekend. So what's coming. You've trained, you've scrummed well in the week in training. It's been competitive. When it comes to the game, you just need to put the two together. And then hopefully, all of the full 8 is all switched on, and it'll be a good day at the office.
Yeah, brilliant. And anything specifically in the gym or are you doing any other drills, any scrum drills or any strength specific exercises that helps you, develop that strength and that power and that endurance in the scrum?
Yeah, I think I like doing work with bands and Swiss balls, because it's really like it's really hard to replicate the same pressure you feel in scrums. But I feel like working with bands and pushing prowlers as well, kind of repeated endurance with the prowler, and then with the bands and the Swiss balls more core orientated. So just getting into a good scrum position and holding it, and then pushing to the limit of where you can see balance. If you have a band, you wear it like a backpack and you hook it up to the rig, and basically it just teaches you to find your balance. But it's also really weird. It's really, really hard to you feel the same as like a scrum. Like a scrum is like, when you're in a scrum, it feels like people are trying to suffocate you, but you still have to remain in like a bear crawl position. That's what it's like. It's like someone trying to choke you out while you're in a bear crawl. It's the only way I can like describe it. But yeah, I was trying to find similar sensations to that. But then, of course, as well, like the only real work is done in actual scrummaging.
All right. So I just want to move on, because we can talk for hours on the scrums, and they will potentially lose half of our audience. I mentioned earlier, 33 years old, turning 34 soon, and you got to start thinking about when you're turning 34.
August.
No, I still got a long way to go. All right, 5 more seasons.
Yeah,
but tell me this, it's something that, towards, I always believed I would play till the age of 38 or 39. I invested in myself. I trained really well. I had a S&C coach outside of the club, because I felt I needed to do that I needed something innovative to prepare my body, because I knew I was getting older and I couldn't train the same. But I do wish that I started anticipating a bit earlier in terms of what I want to do after rugby. Do you have a clear picture in mind of what you would like to do one day when you're retired?
Yeah, I've been asking that question for years. Like, it's really hard to pinpoint what it is you want to do. Like, It's a hard question. For me, I just kind of leant into, okay, what do I like? I like gym and I like scrums. So I'm gonna do that. I didn't think I'd enjoy coaching. I really enjoy scrum coaching specifically. And I like training people as well. And maybe nutrition. I think nutrition is also a big like passion of mine. So, it just made sense to me to go into coaching. To go into coaching, and I think that's somewhere where I'm gonna explore that further. I'm definitely gonna build that up. And then like whatever else comes after that, if it's a bit of investments or business, but I didn't want to do something that I wasn't passionate about or didn't enjoy doing. And I think a lot of it's hard, because there's not a lot of things that are similar to rugby as a rugby player. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of similar jobs where it's like you're gonna get the same enjoyment or something that you're equally as passionate about. So it's it's a hard question. It's a really hard question. But yeah, man, like, I think similar to you, like you moving into the scrumming space and then now you're in a podcast, like I don't think you wouldn't have thought like, yeah, man, I'm gonna do a podcast there.
No, for sure. I think that the reason I ask you that because unless a player really he studied for something or he's got a great project or business that he's put into place while playing, it's clear in his mind, and often it's not clear, and it's difficult because we pour our heart and our soul into rugby. It's everything. We strive for so long to give our best, and I can imagine even at the age of 33, you still have massive ambitions. You still want some goals that you want to hit. If we look at a lot of players, even at the age of 37, they're making their international debut and they're achieving great things. And so anything is possible. But I do find that a lot of rugby players, even myself, and that's why I like to talk about it. I wish I started earlier. For example, and I give this advice to players is that even though you don't know what you're going to do, just be curious. Go visit one of the sponsors, see what they're doing, how it works. It might spark something. It might ignite something. And when you talk about me, like I knew that I wanted to go in coaching, and I knew I wanted to go into specialized coaching, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And obviously, then I started venturing into podcasting, I think more than 5 years ago. That started out. And, then I was a full-time coach at La Rochelle. But then I realized I missed the podcasting space because I miss having these type of conversations, because it keeps me accountable, allows me. But I think the biggest advice, what players should do is that then they should go out there and just learn, on your off day. I spoke, I think it was to Francois van Wyk recently, and he was at Northampton, he went on to Leicester and now at Bath. And he would go out and do some carpentry on his off day. And, things like that, learn a new skill. I think that is very important. But if you don't try something, you won't know. But I think it's an opportunity for you guys, with the sponsors of the club, to connect with them, show real interest in terms of, what they are doing. That is very important. But tell me, where does the passion for PT come from? Obviously everybody's different. I love training, but I'm not going to go do a PT certification. Where does that passion come from?
Yeah, like I said, I really enjoy gymming, but then I also like to when I was, I listened to a few podcasts. I got really into listening to Andrew Huberman and him talking about like how fitness works, why it works like that. He did a couple of series with a man called Andy Galpin, and it was basically like he did one episode and then he said, well, we have to do a deep dives, and there was about 6 episodes where it was, I think it's about like 10 hours of podcast total. And I just listened to all of it. I'm just really interested in like, why does certain training work the way it works? What's the difference? What outcomes do you get that are different from different types of training, like hypertrophy? Why are sets and reps different for strength and hypertrophy? And then you just go into like a deep dive of that. How do you get your best cardiovascular fitness? And I always like to, I wouldn't say like hack, but I was always like, how it is, you have a good off season, you come to the end of the off season, you know preseason is coming. How can I get fit quick? So like figuring out those protocols, and just just an interest in more than just like gymming. Like why are they set up like this? Why do the coaches make us train like this? And then naturally from there, yeah, like I said, I will go to gym, when there's free time, I'll be in the gym. Like, it's just something that I really am passionate about. And then if you can match that and marry that to scrummaging, the benefits again, it's a little extra edge. So I just felt like those two things together makes a lot of sense.
It's interesting that you mentioned. I wish I did more of that when I was still playing. I started doing functional patterns towards the end of my career. So it's not functional training, functional patterns, learning how to engage your whole kinetic chain and using your thoracic spine, how to generate power, that using your core. I wish I knew that early in my career. It was very insightful, but also I think it's important, like you're doing, just say you're listening to podcasts, you're being curious. And that's what you need to do. You got to ask yourself, what can I do to, we say in French, bouge le curseur. So that means moving the needle. How can I push that needle? It's so important, And I'm fortunate enough, I'm in this transition phase. So now I'm mentoring a lot of players, and something which I started to integrate. Originally, players would start to work with me and I'll share the Scrum Dominator mindset, taking them through a grueling 3 months, teaching them all my methods and philosophies. But something which I've integrated now recently is what I call the athlete's operating system. So I don't think we all realize the effect of so many things, the timing of coffee. I'm also a big fan of Andrew Bibbin as well. Recently, I started applying his caffeine rule, that first 90 minutes upon waking up, to avoid it, because apparently I'm not going to pretend like I know it. Maybe you can, like, it impacts your adenosine levels or something like that. So basically it suppresses that stresses, and eventually you pay the price in the afternoon with a massive afternoon crash. I started looking into how can I say, meditation as well, and which players started. I've got profs doing meditation, and it's been a game changer. And also something which I'm a big fan of is, bullet journaling. Not just strict journaling, but bullet journaling is a whole process in terms of how to keep yourself accountable. And I think, that's what players need to think about. What can I do differently? What can I do to give me that edge? And that's what I do as a coach. I'll always try different things. I remember don't have access to it now, but I was a big fan of cold exposure. So I was doing ice baths at La Rochelle. And I remember as a player, I used to hate it. I used to hate it, 30 seconds max. But when I started putting intention behind it, why am I doing it? I eventually got up to 12 minutes. 12 minutes. And I remember Jack now, he was doing it on a regular basis, and I would tell him I'm starting, and they say, "Oh, gee, it's great, you need to try it out." And just by sharing their journey, but having clear intention, I think so. The message that I think what you also mentioned there is that you got to be curious. You got to try and have a better understanding of how you can do certain things, which is very important. Well, listen, I want to come back. We're currently involved. By the time of this recording, we've got the second Champions Cup game coming up. And don't worry, I'm not going to talk about your opposition who you're going to be playing, but just in general, obviously the Premiership teams are different, all right, compared to the French teams. I always laugh. I use this example, when you play Champions Cup, they do that tunnel of honor and applaud and cheer. It's very respectful. It's great. In France, if you lose, guys will still be shouting at each other, swearing at each other. But what is the better changes for you when you're facing French teams coming from the Premiership, and especially in the Champions Cup or the European Cup as we know it? What is different? What is different about the French teams?
Yeah, it's just like, I think in France, rugby is bigger than it is here. It's pretty big here, but obviously football takes priority here. And I think in France, like it's more like football. Rugby is more like football in France. Like, they love it. I remember when we played against Toulouse in the semi-final in Toulouse, the fans were like smashing the bus. Like as we were driving in, the bus was getting like bashed by the fans. And it was crazy. Like this is like another level, do you know what I mean? Like even in Clermont, when I played against Clermont back in, I think it was my first season at Quins, there was fans outside the hotel waiting for us to go on the bus. And that's something that it doesn't happen in the UK, do you know what I mean? It was just like, it's just crazy. The fanatical support that's in France, it's always amazing to see.
Yeah, the French are passionate. That I can tell you that they love their rugby. They behind their team. That's something which I enjoy in France as well. That's why I'm still here. But that adds also a lot of pressure. The modern game. Everything is under microscope. You make one mistake, it becomes a viral reel. Or TikTok. How do you deal with pressure? How do you deal with pressure constantly being under a microscope? You need to perform. You need to play for that extension on your contract. How do you manage that?
I think you got to flip it on its head. You got to say like, yeah, it's a lot of pressure and stuff, but it's also like a privilege. It's an opportunity. Not many people get the opportunity to play in these games at this level. And when you get given that opportunity, it's an opportunity for you to showcase yourself and to, like you said, like play for your next contract, play for your career. And you can either see it as like a daunting task or embrace it. And I think the only way to do it is to embrace it. I mean, like, yeah, you've played in massive games as well before. I'm sure you got that, that feeling where it's like, oof, like it's coming. But the only way to do it is to just flip and embrace it.
That's brilliant. And is there anything specifically that you do? There comes moments where, it just becomes too much. You're mentally drained from training. You're just all over the place. Is there anything that can just help you to balance things out and just kind of like recenter yourself a bit?
Yeah, I just try and just focus on where I am. So I just try and just be exactly where I am in that moment. I just try to shut everything else out and just, whether it's just looking at the ground or looking at the sky or the stadium, just looking around a bit and just taking in where you are and focusing on that moment itself. It helps a lot because when you're focusing on that moment, there's nothing else in your mind.
I'm gonna let the audience in on a secret. When back in my days at the Bulls, obviously in South Africa, the fans were not always too forgiving. Your team's not doing well, they would call a spade, and a few other words which I can't repeat here. But what I would used to do, my secret back then was going to the movies, having a popcorn, the slush puppy, packet of M&Ms. It was just my treat of the week, and my off day, doing something, grabbing a movie. There's loads of other tools today which you can do, whether it's breathwork, meditation. And I do believe players need to be curious about that and check it out. And, you can go on YouTube and there's so many things that you can get access to for free and just try it out and see how it works. You've played with some interesting characters over the years. Is there anybody that stands out? Somebody that just makes you laugh and brings a lot of energy to the team.
Yeah, I think there's a few of those guys. Wynand Olivier was like that at Worcester. He always used to have the best stories from when he was in France, and he always used to like. He was a firm believer in like if he went, had a good night, then the next morning he was in the gym smashing it. And that was something that always impressed me. And he always trained really, really hard. Like he used to train harder than the youngsters, you know what I mean? And I was a youngster back in that day, and he used to smash the gym harder than me and the fitness. And then at Quins, I'd say Danny K, he always brought the energy. Marler was, he is, he's Joe. So you have to experience him to know. Yeah, he always brought the energy. But right now, like, yeah, I'd say James Chisholm, he brings the energy. He's always good to have in the team. And he always lifts you up. Like we were doing rehab now recently, and he just always has such a positive mentality and aura when it comes into Quins and into the team environment. But no, you definitely see characters in rugby, and that's one of the things that is awesome about being in teams, is that, you know, everyone's so different, but everyone is themselves. And is just to see so many different people play towards the top, play together towards the top, a single goal, you know, as one is just pretty awesome.
Brilliant. You know, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, but I wanted to ask you this. You know, if you could do anything else right now and get paid for it, what would that be?
Jeez, that's a hectic question. Anything else and get paid for it? So like any job I want, it's any job I want.
Yeah, anything.
I'd love to be a MotoGP, professional MotoGP rider. That would be my dream, man. Yeah, if I could do that, that'd be awesome.
You love the sport?
I love the sport. I've always watched it since I was young. I find how different those bikes are to other bikes, and how much those riders, like, they're also like, it's a crazy sport. They're racing at 360 kilometers an hour, and then like the smallest mistake and they just hit the dirt. I just find it fascinating, the small margins in that environment as well. I think a lot of similarities in terms of like performance, obviously not like directly parallel to rugby, but I think the performance part, where how dedicated they are to their craft, and yeah, I just like the bikes, man. I rode bikes since I was 10 years old till I got too big and heavy for the bike, and then I switched around.
Okay, awesome. All right, last question before we sign off. You know, we spoke about a lot of setbacks in terms of injuries, and we spoke about some of the great moments, the highlights in your career as well. Is there anything else that stands out in your career which was an unbelievably tough time to get through? And if you can maybe share, give us some insights about it.
Yeah, I think just before I signed at Jersey, like that uncertainty of, I was really, really young. The Kings had gone under financially, and just, I didn't know, you know, if it was, you don't know where the next contract was going to come from. And just that period of uncertainty and not knowing like what happened, it was a very, very dark and scary time. And obviously, like, there was no money, nothing was coming in. There was, you know, it wasn't immediately obvious that I was going to get a contract. But I think learning from that has helped, because I know that, you know, you've been through such a tough, dark situation. You can go through pretty much anything and you'll be okay. So, you know, just focusing on taking the lessons from the negative and the bad parts of your career are very, very important. I remember as well having surgery on my ankle in 2023 as well. Coming back from that was pretty dark, but it just, I went back to when the Kings went under, and I was like, you know, I've done very hard things before, I'll be fine. And like you said, like, being curious about stuff and being proactive with your time, while you're out, or while you don't have opportunities to play, is really, really important. And it might not, like you say, you might not definitively know what you're going to do, but as long as you're curious and trying to move forward, that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. You know, at the end of the day, what you just shared there is just about being consistent, you know, control what you can, and, you know, just staying in the fight. That's the most important. Sometimes when you're not in control of your own future, all you can do is, you know, just be the best version of yourself, and evolve and learn and be curious. And I think there was that time post rugby, when I went into coaching. It took me almost 2 years to get into professional coaching. Even though I'm a former player, that was tough, but I was consistent. And as I've mentioned before, I got my job opportunity at La Rochelle through an Instagram Live. There's lots of things, even now in this transition period, obviously speaking to a lot of guys and, exploring the different opportunities is about being consistent, because you can't just sit around and wait. You got to take control of it as well. But you got to be meticulous as well as doing the right things, taking care of yourself, working hard, grafting. And I also remember there was this stint towards the end of my career before I went to Stade Francais. I was in no man's land, didn't have a contract. And all I did was just train in my garage. I was just doing my weight sessions, doing my metabolic conditioning sessions. And now then one day out of the blue, I got this call, no preseason, went to Stade Francais, and I hit the ground running. I was fitter than the players that actually did a full-on preseason. But yeah, Simon, it was brilliant chatting to you. Thanks for taking the time, and really enjoyed our conversation. We've been in touch over the years, and you still got a good few years. If I have to ask you this right now, if there's one thing you would like to achieve before you call it quits at the end of your career, what would that be? What would the holy grail be for you?
Geez, obviously, everyone wants to play international rugby. That would be incredible. So I think as long as I continue striving for that, I know I'm in a good place. But yeah, I just want to see how far I can go, and I know I've got so much more to give. I'm feeling still really, really good in my body and in my mind, especially. I think that's important. But yeah, hopefully 3 or 4 more seasons, and then we see where we end up.
All right. Okay. Awesome stuff. Hopefully one day we'll be on opposite sides, on the coaching side of things, or on the same side. Who knows?
Well, yeah,
All right, Simon. Thanks, man. Thanks for taking the time, and all of the best for the game lying ahead this weekend. I know you guys got a big game this weekend as well. And, stay safe and take care of yourself, and make sure you're on point with that recovery. All right. Take care of that vessel. But yeah, just to everybody listening to the podcast, I just want to say thanks for supporting the Coach G Show. Been very fortunate recently to have gone top 10 in major countries in the rugby category. But I have realized that a lot of you are listening to the pods and we're getting great feedback. Please subscribe to the podcast, whether you're listening to on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, whichever your preferred platform is. Subscribe and help us to grow the show. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys soon.